But on the crime data, normally over time, reported crimes and total crimes tend to go together. It's just that over the last few years, we've seen this real separation that we've never seen really before. And the reason is just this huge, unbelievably large drop in arrests.
All right, John, thanks for coming back on the podcast. You just informed me that you put out an email regarding the way that data on crime is currently being reported. Because I guess by and large right now, what a lot of the media is doing is saying that crime is down. But what you're saying is that there's an inconsistency in the way that crime is reported in one manner versus the other. I recently did a video about how Chicago is suing Glock for the switches, the prevalence of switches on the guns that they're finding in Chicago. And I used one of the data points to state, well, these switches aren't necessarily causing violence to increase because Chicago's always had this violence. And I pointed to an article where they were talking about how crime or shootings and murders in Chicago were actually down since 2020. So I don't know if that necessarily what you're about to talk about necessarily undermines the point that I was trying to make in that. But from your perspective and with the research and information that you have, is crime up or down universally across the country?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the media has been trying to carry a lot of water for the Biden administration. So they want people to think that the economy is doing well. So you have all these news articles that say, well, surveys show that Americans don't think the economy is doing well, but it's really doing very well. The employment numbers are doing well. I'm an economist. I think that they're missing the boat on that. You have 303,000 jobs created in March, but that's all part-time jobs. The number of full-time jobs has yet again fallen. And so you have people who are getting part-time jobs that's making up the difference there. And also jobs for native-born Americans has been falling over the last year. All the job increases have been for non-Americans. The Biden administration won't say how many work permits that they've given out, but that's just one example. They've also been doing the same type of thing with regard to crime data. Surveys show that Americans are concerned about violent crime increasing, but the media wants to go and say that the actual crime numbers are falling. And the problem is maybe the media just doesn't understand crime statistics very well. But there are two measures of crime. One is the FBI Uniform Crime Reports. Those are crimes reported to police. And the other one is the National Crime Victimization Survey, which surveys 100,000 people each year. And that tries to get at both crimes that are reported to police and crimes that people don't report to police. Most violent crimes aren't reported to police, and the only way we know that is through the National Crime Victimization Survey. And the problem is that those two numbers have been going in opposite directions over the last few years. And there's a simple reason for why they've been going in opposite directions, and that is arrest rates have plummeted. Law enforcement in the United States has collapsed. If you look at the 5 years before COVID, for arrest rates for either all cities or cities over 1 million in population, it was 44%. 44%. 44 out of every 100 reported violent crimes result in arrest. Well, if you look afterwards, it's been falling each year. By 2020, for cities over 1 million, it had gone down to 20% from 40. That's over a 50% drop from 44% down to 20%. That's only 20 out of every 100 reported violent crimes result in arrest. And what happens is that when people don't think that law enforcement or the justice system is going to be able to catch and punish people, they don't bother reporting the crime. And so what's happened is that while reported crimes have gone down, non-reported crimes have soared. Between 2021 and 2022, non-reported crimes went up by like 17%. And
Yeah.
so you have what's happening is that the surveys are right in the sense that people are being victimized more by violent crime. And the media, possibly just because they don't understand the different statistics there, is reporting the fact, though they don't realize, is that people are giving up and not reporting crimes to the police, even though the crimes are still occurring.
I think I wonder if they are actually being presented with both data points, but because by and large our media is going to be, it slants left, and so essentially doing the bidding of the Biden administration, whether or not they just go with the stats that look the most favorable in order to push the idea that, you know, crime is actually going down, considering we're in an election year and we want things to look as good as possible. You think that might play a part in it?
Well, I
as
mean,
well?
I think on the economic data, I think that's more obviously it is definitely obviously the case. But on the crime data, normally over time, reported crimes and total crimes tend to go together. It's just that over the last few years, we've seen this real separation that we've never seen really before. And the reason is just this huge, unbelievably large drop in arrests. I've never seen in recorded history that we've ever had this data. We've never seen this type of drop. I mean, for these large cities, going from 44%. So I'll give you an example. If you look at arrests as a function of total crimes, total violent crimes, both reported and non-reported, only about 8% of total crimes for violent crimes result in arrest. For property crimes, it's 1%. Only 1% of total property crimes result in arrest. And to make that even worse, that's just arrests. That's not even charging. So many of those arrests don't result in a charge, and let alone a prosecution or a conviction. So, for something like property crimes, you're talking about something that's just a fraction of 1 percentage point. So that means out of every 100 crimes that are committed out there for property, so this is burglary, larceny, even auto theft, arson, you just don't see, the risk to the criminal is like non-existent. And I mean, you're literally talking about less than 1% result in a conviction for the crime.
I did a video recently. I can't remember the exact police county it was, but the police chief got on there and basically said, look, we're going to resort to only dealing with 911 emergency calls between these hours. Anything after that, you kind of have to go online and report it yourself. And of course, they try to cloak it under the idea that they were just trying to triage based on efficiency of use of resources. But I think we all know and understand that the current environment with respect to police officers is they're understaffed, and the environment isn't really conducive, very much so, to being a police officer. I personally wouldn't want to be an officer in these times. But I wonder if also people are seeing that, like you pointed out, and starting to realize, you know what, I'm just going to take my safety into my own hands. It's something I preach for a long time now, and I wonder how much of that message, not just only by way of me, but so many more people have become firearm owners and now are entering the space and starting to understand the importance of the Second Amendment. And I wonder how much of that is playing a part into the drop in people reporting these crimes, because they're like, look, I'm gonna have to take care of this myself because I know I can't rely on the government to keep me safe. I would like to think that that's part of it, but I am hard pressed to think that that's the vast majority of the reason why. I think
the gun ownership has gone up because the collapse of the legal system, of the criminal justice system, and I'm glad it's many of the most vulnerable people now. You've seen a big increase in concealed carry permits over the last decade for women and for blacks. people who are most likely victims of violent crime and people who are relatively weaker physically. And so I'm glad to see those changes that are there. But
Yeah.
look, you know, you have a real problem here in the sense that the law enforcement, for many reasons, you know, you mentioned the staffing problems. That's surely a problem. I'm sure also the fact in many of these large urban areas, district attorneys are refusing to prosecute many criminals there. That discourages police too. I mean, what's the point of going arresting somebody if the district attorney isn't going to be willing to charge them with the crime? And so, and look, and I'm sure people, you know, if you call up 911 and they say, well, we're not going to be able to send anybody out to you,
Yeah.
you know, people may not call back in 12 hours or something like that, or the next day to go and deal with this.
I mean,
Go ahead.
oh no, I was just saying, you know, I know me personally, I grew up initially thinking anything goes wrong, you call 911. That was kind of ingrained in me growing up.
Right.
As I've gotten older, I don't necessarily have that mindset anymore. I think my first thought is, all right, how can I deal with this myself? And then subsequently call 911 to deal with the aftermath of what may have happened.
Uh-huh.
And so I wonder how many people have the same mentality as well.
Well, I'm not sure. Just growing up has done that, but I'm pretty sure the fact that somebody calls 911 now and they're told that there's nothing that can be done,
Yeah.
that kind of forces them into having to take care of things by themselves. But you know, the scary problem is that these criminals, you know, so you have violent crime involves direct contact between the victim and the criminal, so you have a chance to try to do something in that case if you're able to. But property crime, by its definition, doesn't involve direct contact between the victim and the criminal. And so there's really no chance for somebody to go and respond on that. You come home and you find your house was broken into. You find that your car was stolen. You find you know, the bicycle from the house was stolen, or whatever it is that gets stolen. And when you're talking about literally 1% of the property crimes resulting in arrest for these cities over 1 million, you know, I'm sure the response is, you know, why bother reporting it? Because the police
Yeah.
aren't going to do anything. They probably tell you they're not going to do anything when you call them and they come out, if they do come out.
Yeah, I recently had a high dollar amount of camera equipment stolen from one of my vehicles. I didn't call the police. I just knew it was rather futile. Nothing was going to happen as a result of it. Luckily, I had somebody I could hold accountable for it from a liability standpoint, which was the valet service that I was using. But even then, I don't know if I necessarily would have called the police in that situation either.
Well, I mean, for something like car theft, you got to report it to the police, or you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to go
Able
and
to get
get
your car,
your
yeah.
insurance on the car. But you know, and these property crimes include auto theft. So you know, it's just to go and say these crimes, even including auto theft, only 1% results in an arrest. Just, you know, I'm sure people are persistent, even if they won't take the report when you call up,
Yeah.
you know, because it's after a certain time, and or they say, look, this isn't important enough. We don't have enough officers to go out and take care of your auto theft there right now. You're going to have to report it, and
Yeah.
and will be persistent just because the amount of money that's involved. And it's just saying, even for those crimes where people will be persistent and try to report it, nothing happens to these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Ironically enough, I was like, I want to say about last week here where I live, there was an apartment complex where 40 vehicles were broken into in the parking garage of this apartment complex. And so
Right.
and I know currently where I live, I know the police are understaffed. So I'm pretty sure they got flooded with a bunch of calls and nothing's going to come of it. And then when you look through the comment section, you see people saying it all over the place. They're like, yeah, they just tell us to go fill out a form online and then go from there. So it's very interesting the way things are kind of playing out right now, especially considering, you still have this messaging from the current administration that we want to push gun control so that you can, and then we want you to trust the government in order to keep you safe. But yet, like you've pointed out, they've created an environment by way of the policies that you really honestly can't rely on your state or local government in order to keep you safe, or federal for that matter. But at the same time, they refuse to kind of engage.
Well,
in
law enforcement's overwhelmingly a local issue.
Yeah.
The number of police that are hired is determined locally. The types of policing policies that you have are determined locally. The district attorneys who are making decisions whether to charge or prosecute people are overwhelmingly elected locally. The judges who determine what sentences to impose or whether to let criminals out of jail are overwhelmingly elected across the country locally. Even you've had some states like California and Illinois and New York have bail reform at the state level. But you have many places, even in Texas, where you have essentially local DAs in Houston or who basically don't even ask for bail in many situations that are there. It's you have all these things.
No, and I don't think there's a coincidence that the vast majority of these places that you're referencing are run. The vast majority of these places are blue. These cities
I think they're for cities over 1 million.
Yeah.
I think they're all run by Democrats.
Yeah.
So it just, but the question is, at what point are people going to say enough is enough on this? But I
think they kind of are.
Yeah, well, we'll see whether they elect different people. That's kind of the ultimate thing that's going to be there. If they keep electing the same district attorneys, the Soros district attorneys who were running for re-election over the last couple of years, they've had in 2022, they had a 100% re-election rate. So, that indicates to me that there are a lot of people in these areas that apparently weren't tired enough of their policies that are there.
I think there's also the component of people who don't necessarily pay attention to local elections, which is odd to me because those are the elections that affect you on a day-to-day basis the most. But I still don't think a lot of people really understand that, because so much of the presidential election gets so much of the attention that the local elections just kind of fly under the radar. But yet you have these anti-gun groups who focus very heavily on local elections, almost more so than they do on the federal level, as far as federal elections in that regard. So I don't have the answer in terms of how to get people to understand that. And then I think there's also a component where people who are going out and buying firearms and just saying, you know what, I'm going to buy my firearm now that I bought my firearm. I'm going to vote the exact same way on other issues, but I've changed my mind on the firearm issue, but I'm going to continue voting the other way. And I've always been of the mindset that the relationship between law enforcement and the community should be a symbiotic relationship. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to get my gun, screw law enforcement. It should very much be a symbiotic relationship from the standpoint that if we can't get there on time, yes, we want you empowered enough to be able to defend yourself, but we're going to apply all the resources and abilities that we have to protect you as well. And seen as a kind of
even though the politicians may not have very good views on this, if you look at surveys of police officers, they're extremely sympathetic to private ownership of guns. They have, at least in the past. Police One, which is the largest private organization of police across the country, they have about 450,000 members. They'll say 76% of their members think that private ownership of guns for reducing crime is either extremely or very important. Over 90% strongly support liberal concealed carry laws that are there. You know, to be honest, I've kind of always wondered whether one of the reasons why there's been the defunding the police, because what they did was they would defund it, and then after a year or two, they'd go back and
And
often
then,
try to increase it again, was to simply move out a lot of the older police officers, which tended to be much more conservative, so that the officers that they replaced them with would be ones that they could kind of mold their views more,
mhm.
so that they'd be more in kin with kind of issues like gun control and other things that are there. Um,
I never
so,
thought
you
about
know,
that. That's
who
actually very
knows whether that.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, no, actually never thought about that before because I've always made the case that there are some people who are pro defund the police who are like, no, we're not really actually talking about defunding the police. I'm like, no, these groups understand language incredibly well. They knew what they were saying when they started the messaging, and so the fact that you pointed out, maybe this was incredibly strategic from the perspective of being able to just kind of flush out all of the officers and sheriffs and chiefs who are inherently pro 2A, and then bring on those who will play the game, play the politics, and do the bidding of the anti-gun lobby, as I like to call
Well, who knows? Maybe it's just a conspiracy theory on my part, but
them.
uh,
I'm
you
not
know,
very heavy on the
it's
conspiracy theory side, but I'm more inclined to think it's not a conspiracy theory.
okay. Well, who knows?
But before we go, you want to touch on another topic that you've written on recently with respect to AI. Um, I'm an early millennial, so I kind of grew up in Generation X, and then so I had the time without computers and I had the time with computers, and so for me, Google it, right? That was a huge change and shift in the way that we acquired information because it was instant and
Sure.
going in, we can search it and pull up all the information we need. Right now, we are in transition as far as how we acquire information via AI with things like ChatGTP and so forth and so on. And the question arises as to how will AI handle the firearm issue in this country, because we all know that these technologies aren't necessarily being invented or crafted by individuals who are pro 2A.
Right. Well, we wanted to get a handle on that, and I think the same biases that you see in a Google News search, you see in these AI chatbots that you have. Anybody who does a search using Google News search, you'll find articles from the Trace or the New York Times on gun control issues come
Yeah,
right up at the top. Things that you and I would rely on more heavily are, if they show up at all, are going to be buried way back in the pages there.
yeah,
And the thing is, what you find is that this, as I say, the same biases, because what they're determining when these AI chatbots, you go and you give it a question, and
hmm
students and reporters and researchers are using this as a source. You can have them write up an essay for you, and they put the same type of weighting on different sources of information that things like Google News does. So there are 20 AI chatbots that are out there. And so we asked them a question, 16 questions, 9 of them dealing with crime, 7 of them dealing with gun control issues,
hmm
to try to see where they come out. So on crime, it was things like, do higher arrest and conviction rates reduce crime? Do prosecutors who are refusing to prosecute property theft result in more property theft? Does the death penalty reduce crime? Do voter ID laws prevent vote fraud? Um, you know, can you name, do gun bans, either complete gun bans or complete handgun bans, reduce murder and homicide rates?
yeah,
And what you find is that, with the exception of Elon Musk's Grok, and which gives on average conservative type answers to these things, so that higher arrest rates and kind of higher conviction rates reduce crime rates. and Francis Mistral, which is neutral on average. On some it's liberal, on some it's conservative. All the other chatbots are very liberal. And the two worst are unfortunately the two most prominent ones: Facebook's Llama and Google's Gemini. Those two, it's not so you can say you disagree, strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. So on things like, do you think higher arrest rates and higher conviction rates reduce crime? They would say they strongly disagree. Do you think longer prison sentences reduce crime? They'll strongly disagree. Does the death penalty reduce crime? They'll strongly disagree. So they take by far the most consistently left-wing positions on these types of things. And then on gun control, it'll be things like, do you think concealed carry reduces crime? Google's Gemini doesn't answer those questions yet, but Facebook's Llama, again, is the most extreme on that. And in this case, all the U.S. chatbots are even Musk's Grok are liberally biased. They say they don't think concealed carry reduces crime, or they think having an assault weapons ban will reduce crime, or that mandatory gun locks will make people safer, or that none of the discussion about, you'll make it more difficult for people to be able to get access to guns, to be able to go and protect themselves. I'll give you one example that I found particularly troubling, and that was with regard to do either a complete gun ban or a complete handgun ban reduce murder and homicide rates. And consistently, these AI chatbots would go and say yes, and they'd point to Australia. Well, the thing is, there's so many errors with that. One is that Australia didn't ban either all guns or all handguns. They had an initial buyback of about 27% or so of the guns that were there, by confiscation of the guns. But people were allowed to go and buy guns again afterwards. And so you saw an immediate sharp drop, but then it increased over time. By 2010, the gun ownership rate in Australia was back above what it was before the confiscation that occurred there. So they hardly banned either all guns or all handguns. And I would argue it didn't have the beneficial effect in terms of crime rates that many claim. I think it's just statistical malpractice, because what happened is that firearm homicide and firearm suicides were falling for 15 years prior to it.
This is prior to the ban, right? Prior to the ban.
Prior to the confiscation.
Okay. Gotcha.
So
the confiscation, sorry.
Just imagine you had a perfectly straight line going over the entire period. And you could pick any year along that line, and the after average is going to be below the before average that you have. But if it was a perfectly straight line, so it's falling at exactly the same rate afterwards as it was beforehand, you look at it and say, well, it's not really obvious that this had any beneficial impact that was there. But, you'd want to see, does it fall slower or at a faster rate afterwards? Is there some discontinuity in the line? Yeah. But in fact, if you look at firearm homicides, for example, it was falling before, and then when the confiscation occurred, it stopped falling for about 8 years. If the confiscation people, if the gun control people were right, it should have been an immediate sharp drop and then an increase over time.
Yeah.
You don't see anything like that at all. If I look at it, I say, well, it kind of looks like it didn't accomplish what you were hoping it was going to accomplish. If anything, maybe the reverse happened. And also I would look at total murders rather than firearm homicides. But anyway, it's just amazing just to see how inaccurate the information is that these different AI programs put out on this.
Yeah. I mean, even I know, and whenever I'm doing my research for any of the videos that I'm doing on topics I'm doing, I know once I click it into Google, just go 2-3 pages deep, because everything is going to be anti-gun links, almost all of it. So I have to go 2-3 pages into my search immediately without even looking at the first page, because I know it's going to be completely and utterly biased. And even now with AI, like some of the my editor, he was telling me about how if he tries to generate AI photos or images, they won't do anything with a gun in it. You can't. It would just tell you flat out, no, we're not doing it. So I'd like to say I'm surprised about this, but I'm not. I honestly, I kind of expect it to get a little bit worse. But before I let you go ahead.
All the responses that we got on our website at crimeresearch.org. But look, the reason why we did this was just to make people more educated consumers, so that they know kind of the biases for the different chatbots. So if you want to do crime, you go to Musk's Grok, I would argue, because to me, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm an economist, but I think if you make something riskier for criminals to do, they'll do less of it. You know, so the reason why in our earlier discussion, you know, why total crimes are increasing is because there's little consequences for these guys. When you have, you know, 8% of all violent crimes resulting in arrest, or, you know, 1% of all property crimes resulting in arrest for cities over 1 million in population, you know, you're going to get a lot more crime. You know, reported crime may fall, but total crime is going to go up. And so, you know, it's the same. If you make the price of apples go up, people buy fewer apples. If you make it riskier for criminals to commit crime, they're going to commit fewer crimes. And so I look at these things, and, you know, I have a hard time understanding why people have these views that they do about crime, and why the people who are programming either things like Google News Search or these AI programs want to weight certain types of information and kind of completely ignore other information there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of just the space we're in, honestly. I'm at a point now where I'm so used to it. I'm so used to the bias that it's almost become a norm for me. And I wonder if I need to take a step back a little bit and reestablish a new norm, just for the standpoint that it's only going to get worse from here, I think, especially as we inch closer and closer to the election.
Well, you know, these things have an impact. I mean, you can imagine with Google News searches, you know, just there was a report that came out recently that during the Democratic primaries this year, when Robert Kennedy was still in the Democratic primaries, if you were to go and do a Google News search on the candidates that were running in the Democratic primary, Google News wouldn't let you know that Kennedy was running. They would go and provide information on Biden and Marianne Williams, but not Robert Kennedy. And so, you know, you look at those types of things. You know, I'm sure lots of people who want to learn about different ballot issues or want to learn about different candidates will go and Google them. And if you have just consistently left-wing sources that come up, I can only imagine what impact that has on elections. I have to believe that something like that will swing at least a few percentage points from one candidate to another. Yeah, oh, I'm just saying at least a few percentage points. It could be a lot higher. And it affects people perniciously in many different ways. I mean, if you're a student who's in high school or college and you want to write an essay on something and you do a Google News search in order to try to provide information on it, and you just get, you know, you don't even see that there's another side to these issues. And you know, 20 years ago or so, when I'd get interviewed by the media, there was still a fair number of reporters that kind of felt it was necessary to at least acknowledge that there were arguments on both sides. You go and you read the New York Times and Washington Post now, they don't even talk to people on the other side on gun control or crime or whatever. And so, it just kind of compounds the problems with Google News search. You go and look up, and if they just give you articles from the New York Times and Washington Post type places at the beginning, and you read those, you don't even know that there are people that even think on the other side of these issues. And so I'm you and I, as you say, you kind of grew up before, there were these, Google search and things like that. So you were able to get information from a lot of different sources. But kids these days who rely heavily on computers and stuff to do it, they may never be exposed to this. And I can only imagine what impact this has on people's views. I mean, it's not just the biases in K through 12 or in colleges. I mean, I've been a university professor, and I think it's pretty commonly known that virtually all the professors these days are left-leaning. When I first got my PhD in economics and joined academia, it was in economics, which was about the most conservative of the fields. It was like 60% Democrats, 40% Republicans. But you go back, 15 years ago now, it was like 12-1 Democrats to Republicans. I'm sure it's probably even more so now than it was beforehand. And other fields outside of economics, it's, you're lucky to get 40-1 or something like that in terms of Democrat to Republicans. And so you have, it's not too surprising, young people's views, if you have social media, going and providing them information on one side, if you have the search engines providing information on one side, and if you have their teachers in, K through 12 or their professors in colleges all being on one side, it's pretty hard to, guess that you're going to have people coming out with views that are going to be similar to yours or mine on many of these issues.
Nope, absolutely. And I'm seeing it every single day, which is why I try to put as much of my information out and spread it across
glad you're there.
platforms.
I appreciate you being there and trying to make a difference on these things, make sure people know that there's another side there.
Yeah, the one I'm worried about the most is honestly TikTok, just because that's where a vast majority of the youth is. And right now, TikTok is essentially purged gun content from the platform. So it's essentially an echo chamber for either non-existence of 2A information or just complete opposition. And so I try.
No, it has a big impact.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Well, I want to thank you once again for joining me on the podcast. Like I say, you're always welcome. You're always a wealth of knowledge that I think people need to hear. And then just real quick, just let everybody know where they can go to get more information on what we talked about here, and just general stats and information about just the overall conversation with respect to the Second Amendment going on in this country.
Sure. Well, I mean, our website is crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. And right up at the top, it has the information that we were talking about on how reported crimes have fallen, even though total crimes have gone up. And we also have recent posts on our study that we did on AI. We have other things there too, like we go through the recent data showing that over the last 8 years or so, 92% of violent crime has nothing to do with guns. Just so, because the administration wants to go and say that violent crime is a gun problem. And that's simply not true. And the way you reduce violent crime is the same way you reduce gun crime, and that is you have to make it riskier for criminals to commit crime. And so all these topics that we've been talking about today fit together on this. Absolutely. Well, but it's crimeresearch.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me, and I hope you come back soon.
Well, thanks. It doesn't do us any good to do all this research if we're not on shows like yours to try to get it out there. So I greatly appreciate your time.
Yep.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Guns aren't political. That's why I need your help getting this message to spread on YouTube by clicking the thumbs up button, leaving a comment to let me know what you think of the video, then subscribing to the channel. But most importantly, click that bell symbol. For products featured in this video, click the links in the description.